Alright, here I've got my mail out, Mercury. Poor guy's a little chilly. I had snakes out roaming around. Somebody flipped the off switch on all their heating. So they've been without their heating. But it's not that big a deal here. It doesn't get dangerously cold for them. Just a little bit on the chilly side. It was around 68. Isn't gonna hurt them, but we got their heating switched back on. Somebody bumped it while they were out roaming around. He's still plenty active. Stay out of the camera, bud. Yeah, so we're just kind of letting him absorb my body heat. So he's getting back up to, nice warm temperature. Then we'll put him back in and see if he wants to go lay on his hot side. But in this video, I was going to talk a little bit about power feeding. I think it was Weston from Wildfire Retics posted a video, or not a video, some photos the other day of one of his snakes with a big meal inside its belly. Got quite a bit of buzz. You get the usual customers chiming in. And figured I'd talk a little bit about the difference between feeding big meals and power feeding. On the surface they sound the same. But actually there's a bit of a difference. Power feeding will lead to an obese snake, while you can feed big meals and grow your snake up to a large size without power feeding it. Essentially, a growing snake is going to convert most of those calories into growth and not excess weight. And as long as you pull back at the right age, you grow your snake up to a good solid size, and then you pull back. Usually 3 or 4 years old is when they have put in most of their growth. They'll still continue to grow after that, but the primary amount of their growing is done during that first 3 to 4 years. If you've fed them optimally. Then after that you'll get some growth. Depends, it ranges from snake to snake how much you'll get after that, but it does slow down quite drastically. And then at that point is when you have to worry about overfeeding and really monitor their weight. So a young growing snake, you can feed big meals. And it's just, a play it by ear or eye. Watch your snake, how they're developing, how does their body composition look. You feed a big meal and then you want to wait a good month before feeding them again. Give their body a chance to rest. Typically you feed a retic a big meal and it'll be done digesting that meal, even if it's a really large meal, in about a week. In a week's time that meal will be fully digested. It might be holding on to it on the back end. It might have not used the bathroom yet, but that lump will be nowhere in sight. That big food lump. I typically tend to feed my snakes larger meals. This guy is an exception because he kind of polices himself. He never overeats or accepts large meals. He'll usually eat about 2 rabbits and a small chicken, which isn't really that much. He doesn't really leave much of a lump in his belly. And that's now. He used to eat less than that. And he's a male, so during breeding seasons he will naturally take time off eating because he's hormonal and more interested in females than he is actually securing a meal. So he's my slenderest, least eating snake. So maybe he wasn't the best example to pull out for this video, but he's the guy that was up and ready, surprisingly. Anyways, my big girl, she eats about 30 to 35 pounds per sitting on a typical feeding. I'm doing a little bit different schedule with her for this year just for experimentation purposes, but her typical feeding schedule is 30 to 35 pounds of food per feeding. And then I'll give her about 3 months break in between. So 3 months without eating is it's a pretty big window, but it's not outrageous for these snakes. When they're bigger adults, if you're feeding larger meals, you can go, your snake only really needs to eat about 3 or 4 times out of the year. So if it eats 3 times out of the year, that's basically 4 months in between meals. So your snake will still be perfectly fine, perfectly healthy. You are going to have a bit of a different beast on your hands though. When your snake is 3 to 4 months out of a feeding, it's highly energetic. It's much more active. It wants to be out roaming around far more frequently. As opposed to if you're feeding every 2 to 3 weeks. That's basically a way to keep your snake sedated. If you're gone at work most of the day, and like most people are, you feed your snake just to keep it inactive. So it's less of a chore for you to have to deal with. Me, I love letting my snakes out to roam around my room. I've secured my room so it's snake proof, so there's a really minimal amount of trouble they can get into in here, so they're free to just come out and roam. So yeah, that's the way I like to do it. Big meals, spaced out roughly 3 months. I might experiment with 4 months at some point, just to see. It keeps my snakes long and lean. Like I was saying, there's a difference between doing that and power feeding. Power feeding is when you just constantly slam your snakes full of food. You're feeding them large meals, and by the time they process and evacuate that meal, you're ready to feed them again without any kind of real break in between, in the hopes that you're going to get them to be some kind of super giant. That would be power feeding. And usually the results of that don't catch up with you until the snake's about 3 or 4 years old, when the obesity of an animal is much more easily acquired. Like once they've stopped putting all those calories towards actual growth, of muscle and bone tissue and organs, that's when they'll start putting on the fat reserves. So he's constricting the heck out of my arm right now. My hand's going to sleep. But yeah, so power feeding is big to large meals very frequently. Can vary depending on the approach that person's doing, but typically if you're feeding large meals every 3 weeks and you're just slamming your snake with food constantly without giving it time to have a break or be active for long stretches of time and get exercise, that's more along the lines of what I would consider power feeding. Especially if your animal's starting to demonstrate signs of obesity, where you can visually see that animal is carrying excess weight. I'd be willing to compare my snakes with any snakes. My snakes are kind of on the lean side. You can see, I mean, this guy's not the best example because he doesn't get fed large meals, but he's very long and lean. It's a very long, lean, slender snake. My biggest female is also fairly lean, especially when she is, 3 months out from eating. And of course, she eats about 35 pounds of food, and she'll absorb that and put a little bit of weight back on. And then that food passes through her. She looks nice and lean again after about 3 or 4 weeks. And she has about 2 months after that to come around, be highly active, get plenty of exercise. So there's kind of an art and a science to it, to keeping your snake healthy. Now obviously everybody's got a different approach. You could do smaller meals more frequently, but I don't know. I just don't like doing that because snakes constantly eating, it's not quite as active. I mean, you will have a little bit of activity, but it's not like the really long stretches of going active without eating. Your snake might be up and active after, let's say you feed it, it digests for a week, and then it's got about a week and a half of being active, and then it eats again. It's not, I don't know, that doesn't really resonate with me in the way I want to do things. I like to give it prolonged periods of time of being out and active and really working up a nice, good appetite. You see some of these snakes, they get to the point where they don't even strike their food anymore. They're so kind of nonchalant because they don't really ever get an opportunity to really build up an appetite to where their feeding response isn't really the strongest anymore. I typically tend to like my snakes to have a very strong aggressive feeding response. That lets me know that they are actually hungry. They do actually want the food at that given time, and that they have a nice, healthy, strong appetite, that their instincts are still fully functioning to want to consume that prey. When I see snakes that just kind of creep up to their meal and just kind of start slowly eating it, I don't know. That just seems like the snake's becoming a little too lazy and lethargic for its own good. But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts and theories on the situation. Because like I was saying with that post with wildfire retic, you get a bunch of people kind of crying that the snakes are being overfed and power fed and abused, and I just don't really see it that way. I don't really see it that way. As these snakes are growing, they can consume more food to get them up to size, and then at a certain point in time you pull back. All the while you're monitoring their weight and health, You can tell when your snake starts looking a little pudgy. Especially if you've been at this a while and you have a good eye for it. Isn't that right, bud? Isn't that right? Anyways, those are just some of my thoughts on the matter. It seemed like a pretty popular topic in the forums this week, so figured I'd comment on it in a video, give my thoughts and opinions. There's probably more that could be said on the issue, but that's really all that's coming to mind right now. Oh, I also did want to mention that not every retic has the same body type. There are reticulated pythons that are naturally more heavily built They've got a thicker construction to their body, just naturally. You could let that snake go 3 months without eating, just as I let my big girl go without eating, and it's naturally going to have a larger, thicker build to it. Not every snake is built the same way. They're not all extremely long, slender noodles. They're just like people. You know, people come in every kind of shape and fashion you can imagine. Short, tall, skinny, wide. Retics are the same way. You have retics of different builds. Most of them are long and skinny. Most of them, but you do have those exceptions. You have your your offensive lineman built retics also. Just like people, you know, some people are built like giant football offensive lineman type bodies. Retics have those, you know, outliers in them too. You will see it from time to time, so you can't always just assume that because the snake's a little thicker than your normal retic that it's being overfed or power fed. Some of them are just more heavily bodied. Some of them. So you can't just always jump to conclusions. You do have to have a bit of information on that snake, I guess. Although sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can tell the difference between a naturally heavily bodied snake and a snake that's just obese. Anyways, I guess that's a conversation for another video. Retic body composition. Alright, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you to my guy for modeling during this video. You did a good job, buddy. Let's let you say goodbye one last time. Get a close-up of his face. He's warming up as he's collecting my body heat. It's transferring to him. He's much warmer now. Anyways, we'll see y'all later. Come say goodbye, buddy. God bless. God bless. Goodbye.